Welcome to this video presentation, Movement Planning. After this presentation, you should be able to summarize the movement planning process, explain the importance of border crossing, biosecurity, and dangerous cargo procedures. Recall the different planning factors, summarize the reverse planning and use of gantt chart. In general, in all kinds of movement, United Nations, NATO, multinational or national, the participating nation will plan, control, and execute the movement. The host nations has the ultimate authority to approve, coordinate, and control all movements on its territory. Both the participating nations and the host nations will use their own National Movement Coordination Centre, which will approve, control, and coordinate air, sea, and inland surface movement. For NATO missions, NATO takes responsibility for coordinating the strategic movement. The Allied Movement Control Center initiates, plans, prioritizes, and deconflict strategic movements, including deployment, transportation for sustainment, and redeployment. NATO plans and execute the tactical movement, the awesome phase. For United Nations missions, the United Nations Movement Control Section is responsible for all movements with strategic and tactical movements. A true police contributing nation may negotiate with the United Nations for taking responsibility for the strategic movement. United Nations has their own system for tactical movement, quite different from the NATO's awesome process. In all kinds of movement, the sending nations will plan and execute all national movements inside own country. This presentation will describe movement planning in general, independent of who that conduct the planning. NATO and United Nations has different documents that will serve as a baseline for the future planning. NATO's documents, the Combined Joint Statement of Requirement, the Allied Disposition List, and the Commander's Required Date are all explained in the awesome presentation. UN's documents are the participating nations' Memorandum of Understanding and/or the Letter of Assist, and both are explained in the pre-study presentations. United Nations do not use the Commander's Required Date, but they have their own timeline when the different units should be in the final destination. This is similar to NATO's desired order of arrival. Even if UN do not use the abbreviation MNDDP, they do develop the same plan for strategic movement of their units. When planning movement, we need to take into consideration the following: the operational plan, including the order of battle for the troop taking part and their phasing into the operational area, the distances to the area of operation and the speed of reacting requirement, the availability and conditions of the transport nodes, including requirements for special equipments, for example, loading and unloading aids, material handling equipments, and securing materials, the numbers, types, payload, and capacity of the transport assets to be used, security requirements, logistic support requirements from the multinational and/or host nations units, including regulatory requirements, customs clearances, immigrations, dangerous goods, etc. Contract to support operations, and communications and administrative arrangements in transit areas. The CCA procedure helps to ensure that there are no unnecessary delays and/or expenses incurred by confirming that the consignor or receiver whether the final destinations or at the next nodal point, is fully able to safely receive and handle the consignment. This is particularly important in the case of vehicles, ESO containers, and other abnormal and indivisible loads. There's no strict definition of the CCA procedure, but it should combine some of the following. Confirmation that the nodes and the receiver are ready and able to receive an impending dispatch, with particularly emphasis on receipt and handling procedures. Confirms the consignment's configuration, including any changes to special handling requirements and the estimated time of arrival. A ship delay advice message should be issued when necessary to avoid wastage and expenses which may be incurred by unused manpower and other resources tasked to receive the consignment. Border crossing procedures. The movement organization is responsible for liaison with local immigration and customs authorities and advising units on compliance with the applicable documentation and procedures. Biosecurity procedures. Failure to comply with these biosecurity procedures and processes may have a direct impact on the operational capability, with shipments being delayed or even refused entry. It is therefore essential that commanders on all levels ensure that all military vehicles, equipment, and cargo transport units fully comply with biosecurity requirements during deployment. Dangerous cargo or goods are ammunition, explosives, and other substances that, when transported, are a risk to health, safety, property, or the environment. There are international rules that regulate transportation of dangerous goods. Many nations have also their own regulations. This slide depicts some of the needed information regarding the planning factor air assets. This slide depicts some of the needed information regarding the planning factor airports. This slide depicts some of the needed information regarding the planning factor seaports. This slide depicts some of the needed information regarding the planning factor rail cargo. This slide depicts some of the needed information regarding the planning factor railhead. This slide depicts some of the needed information regarding the planning factor road cargo. This slide depicts some of the needed information regarding the planning factor roads. After gathering all available information on each factor, air, sea, and rail assets, airports and seaports, railheads and roads, each factor needs to be analyzed. This slide depicts an example of analyzing the factor limited availability of military strategic airlift. When forwarding a request for information, please note all requests for information should be measured or answered by yes or no, or meters, kilos, metric tons, numbers, etc. An example: how many sidetracks are there, or how long is each sidetrack? One way to physically do movement detail planning is by using a Gantt chart or Excel spreadsheet. Here it will be easy to maintain an overview of all the types of modes of transportations and transshipments on all single transports or movements. These charts or spreadsheets will also pinpoint where deconfliction is needed. To make it even more visible, the movement community has agreed on a color coding system where the different modes of transportations has their own color. Reverse planning is based on the time when troop and equipment have to be operative in the mission area, the commander's required date or desired order of arrival. The planning is done by planning step by step backwards. Each different mode of transportation included necessary transshipments to satisfy the requirement from the commander's required date or desired order of arrival. If one leg of the movement and mode of transportation or a transshipment takes longer time than originally planned, all movements before that leg needs to be moved backwards in time. That means start earlier than originally planned. We have in this presentation introduced you to movement planning. Key takeaway: movement planning should be conducted as reverse planning based on the commander's required date or desired order of arrival. Movement planning must keep in mind the international and national border crossing, biosecurity, and dangerous cargo procedures. Thank you for following this presentation.